Hi, everyone. I'm Les Honeywell, and with me are Tom Walker and Jordan LeBold. And we're here to talk today about the legality of border carbon adjustment measures. So what are border carbon adjustment measures, or BCAs? Well, BCAs help prevent carbon leakage. They stop domestic companies from going abroad to escape domestic measures which they find unfavorable. This helps countries ensure that their domestic carbon pricing regimes remain effective and help countries meet their Paris Agreement goals. In the Canadian context, which is where we were dealing, there's the fuel levy, which is essentially a flat tax that consumers pay at the pump. And there's the OBPS, or the output-based pricing system, which charges emitters for the amount of carbon emissions they produce in their production. And it's the OBPS that largely we focused on. So the question is, what are the WTO compliance issues of border carbon adjustment measures? And could a WTO waiver be used to resolve these compliance issues? And in resolving these questions or answering these questions, we found a number of legal issues came up.
As my colleague said, there was three main legal issues that we used to ground our analysis and give it a lens. These are, is the OBS a tax or is it a regulation that affects WTO compliance? There's also a like products issue, whether products can be differentiated based on their embedded carbon. And lastly, we looked at a lens of, even if the system is non-compliant with the WTO, can the general exceptions of Article 20 protect a BCA regardless? So a BCA has many potential components of it that we term design options. And each of these design options has WTO compatibility issues. So with these legal issues in mind, we evaluated all of these design options, as you can see on screen, for their WTO compliance. But in doing so, we're struggling with how to present this in a easy to understand form. And what we came up was a chart of design options. These design options we coded based on their WTO risk and presented various different packages with different policy objectives and WTO compatibility.
We also considered the possibility of a waiver by the WTO membership that would enable otherwise non-compliant measures to nevertheless be compatible with WTO rules, and a waiver would not change the kind of delicate balance that's developed over the key trade law concepts like most favored nation principle and national treatment. And we ended up coming up with three possible criteria that could be used to set the scope of a border carbon adjustment waiver. We had several challenges during this paper, some of them just because of the sheer length. It was important that we kept repetition to a minimum, and that was challenging because we were using the same legal tests in many different sections, and we were trying to make sure that both the reader could follow along if they jumped around to different sections, but also avoiding unnecessary repetition. We also, because we had multiple authors working on the report, we had to make sure that we were maintaining a consistent tone throughout the document, using the same terminology, that sort of thing. And the legal analysis was also very challenging because this is a relatively novel area of WTO law. It's definitely an up and coming area, but right now it's not as well developed as some other areas. And that kind of difficulty was compounded by the fact that we were then applying that to the very unique and complex Canadian OBPS, as Les kind of discussed earlier. On behalf of the group, I'd like to thank TradeLab for this awesome opportunity, and we'd also like to thank the beneficiary and our mentors. I know that we all found this to both be very informative and also very interesting, challenging, and an exciting project.